Hello YouTube, it's Michael B. Thank you so much for checking out today's video. And in today's video, well, we got some exciting news to share with you as Stern Pinball have given us the full reveal of the new Dungeons & Dragons, the Tyrant's Eye pinball machine. This thing is really cool. Can't wait to tell you my thoughts on it. Also, on top of that, MyArcade continues to roll, giving us new CES teases. It looks like they're going to have a very interesting lineup for the event. And then last but not least, our good buddy Glenn is making the FU Multicade. I still think it needs a better name, but anyways, we've got some new images of that I want to show off and talk a little bit about how the arcade is progressing. I'm going to tell you more about all these things right after this. So that's right, guys, we got a ton of stuff to cover today. I mean, that Dungeons & Dragons pinball is so cool. I can't wait to get into that in a couple seconds. MyArcade continues to roll, and of course, the GRS Build-a-cade FU. Very cool. Anyways, before we get started, I want to say thank you so much, everybody, for checking out the video. Guys, I always appreciate the support. If this is your first time to the channel, you like what you see, go ahead and subscribe. Click the bell for notification. All that YouTube jazz. So after the brief tease the other day, we finally get our first full look at Dungeons & Dragons, the Tyrant's Eye new Stern pinball machine. It's going to be officially unveiled at CES, where a couple of my friends, Justin, Console Kits, B Kong, 19K Fox, and maybe even Patrick Dubs, are going to head to Vegas and go check it out. I can't wait to see what they think of it. Anyways, this is a very cool looking machine coming to us from Brian Eddy. And also, Dwight Sullivan is going to be doing the code, so it looks like it's going to be an amazing game. It's got one of the coolest mechs I've ever seen in pinball with that giant red dragon head up there. It's also got the cube. There's so many things I like about this machine, albeit there is one thing I don't really love, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. So we got our full reveal of the Dungeons & Dragons pin yesterday, and my god, this thing is beautiful. I know it's not a theme everybody is in love with, but this has to be one of the coolest pinball machines and pinball playfields I've seen in a very long time. I'm obviously a very big fan of Brian Eddy's work, going all the way back to Medieval Madness and, of course, Attack from Mars being two of my favorite classic pinball machines of all time. Then on top of that, he's done Stranger Things, which I'm absolutely in love with, as you all know. Venom, a little less so with the RPG elements, but all those pinball machines, including the RPG elements we talked about with Venom, works so well with Dungeons & Dragons. It's such a good fitting. So if you head on over to the Stern website, now everything is currently listed. You can check with your local distributors to find out more information. This comes in 3 different models. We get the Pro, Premium, which is the one I think most people will want to get here, and of course the limited edition, which is limited to only 740 machines based on the year that Dungeons & Dragons really emanated in 1974, so it's to honor that. So very limited edition. I never ever say go with the limited edition, but it's entirely up to you. They all have different art packages, and you get to choose which is the best. Now, one thing that's going to be very different for pinball fans is the art on these machines. This isn't your typical pinball art, you know, what you're accustomed to from Zombie Yeti. This is actually Dungeons & Dragons illustrators. So they actually went out and got guys that do the illustrations for Dungeons & Dragons that they're going to be showcasing on the machines. Now, the art that they're using here is based on actual Dungeons & Dragons artists who actually do the art for the campaign books. If you've ever played Dungeons & Dragons, you're drawn in by the amazing art on the front of the book. Here's some classic ones there. And then if you go up top, you can get a look at some of the more recent images, and this is more in the line of what the Dungeon & Dragon art on the playfield and on the sides is going to look like for this machine. Now, while I personally love the artwork, I will say this giant map here, I'm sure is going to be very functional for the gameplay, but for some reason, it feels like a bunch of wasted space here for me. I'm not the biggest Dungeons & Dragons fan, so maybe the map is super important. I don't even remember ever using a map when I played Dungeons & Dragons, so it just seems like this takes up a lot of space from all the other beautiful artwork that you can see around the table. The map, to me, seems like dead space. That's really my only real critique I have taking away from this machine. Now, one of the other points of contention with Stern in the last couple of years is the Pro really feels like a downgraded model. Now, on the last X-Men release, it seemed like that was much better, where that machine actually could lean Pro. You don't seem to lose a lot that's actually functional or important to the gameplay experience when you downgrade to a Pro. And if you look at the matrix here for the game features, I mean, it looks like a lot of the things you're getting in the Premium and LE, you're also getting in the Pro. So from the matrix, it would look like this is potentially a game that could lean Pro, but the matrix here is a little bit misleading, in my opinion. Now, while you do get the giant dragon mech and pretty much everything you get in the rest of the normal game, there is some big differences with the dragon mech that is, kind of like Godzilla, where if you don't have these features, you basically are playing a different game. So in the Premium and LE, the dragon has this crazy AI where the dragon spits out balls, which is a huge pinball moment you will be missing, but also the dragon's head moves back and forth. And as it's moving back and forth, it's actually going to be blocking the lanes and fighting against you. On the Pro, it's just going to move up and down, will not spit out the balls, and stop you from hitting those three buttons. But it's just so important. The game is completely changed while it's not blocking the lanes, while it's not using its AI to shoot the balls out and fight you back. It's such an important feature that if you do decide to go with the Pro, you really are missing out here. You lose a big part of the game. There's also an elevator in the center of the screen that will not be available on the Pro, where it captures balls that you're also going to miss out on. So while the Matrix does look like the Pro is going to be a very good game, it's not going to be the same. Very much like Godzilla, where you don't get the, dropping building mech and you don't get the bridge breaking apart mech. I think if you're seriously considering buying this, you are going to want to go premium. Now, another really interesting mechanic they're putting in here is this magic shield between the flippers, which is an amazing callback to the magic save out lane that was in the original Bally Dungeons & Dragons pinball machine that I previously owned, and just so many other amazing fantasy elements from Dungeons & Dragons. This game is absolutely packed, including RPG elements that are iconic to the franchise and actually taking some stuff from the video game size. Overall, this game is super impressive. Now, if you guys are looking for an amazing first reaction video on the announcement of Dungeons & Dragons Pinball full reveal, go check out my buddy Console Kits. Him and B-Kong do a great two-person podcast every single week. Pinball and arcades for everybody. They cover this in detail. Huge pinball fans, so much knowledge. Do me a favor, go check them out. And also, congratulations to B-Kong, who got nominated for, I think it's Breakout Star of the Year for the Twippies. Congratulations, B. And if you want even more information than you're getting here, than you got from Stern, go check out Loser Kid Pinball Podcast. They had Brian Eddy and Dwight Sullivan on last night going into detail about the Dungeons & Dragons games, other things like the basically the way the multi-ball works, the way that the giant red dragon, I think it was Wrath, he works. You got to go check this podcast out. It was excellent, and it'll give you all the information you need to know on the upcoming Dungeons & Dragons game, which seems like a winner. So, anyways, guys, like I mentioned earlier, this game is going to be available to check out at CES. I think B, Justin, and Fox have some kind of connection where they're actually going to have like a private viewing with Stern in Vegas. So that's very cool. But that's not the only thing that's going to be cool about Vegas, because all week and all last week, we've been talking about this surprisingly. MyArcade, they of course always show up at CES, have a big booth, tons of products to go over, and this year they've been very generous with the teases going into CES. So a couple days ago, we got an icon of a giant handheld coming from MyArcade. We finally got a look at what this was. This is apparently was showed off at last year's CES. This year, it's going to be a go. It's going to happen. This is the GameStation Go Atari 50th anniversary version, and this thing looks really big and really cool, using elements like the keypad. I don't know exactly why it needs R1 and R2 buttons. Maybe you can add additional games to it, but this giant handheld is finally available for Atari fans that want this thing, and it looks like it has multiple ways on which you can play. Now, of course, if you want all the details, like I've been mentioning all week, go check out Gen X Grown Up. John has been covering this thing in massive detail. He has a relationship with MyArcade, so he's been showing off different stuff about the GameStation Go. He has all the key details for you to check out. Go check out John and get all the big information if you're interested in the Atari GameStation Go. Now, that isn't all the MyArcade news we have to share with you today. Probably the big announcement that came out first that had everybody kind of reeling was the fact that MyArcade had secured a partnership with Sega and would be making games in their different versions of like the game. What is it? The mini player, micro player, all those different versions with Sega licensed games. And there were some questions there because it appeared some of these, if not all of these, could in fact be console ROMs. Of course, we got our first look at one of the games that is a console ROM. Instead of coming out in like one of those handheld versions they make, is going to be coming out in a model which is known as the Joystick player, and that's based on The Revenge of Shinobi, a 100% console game. And I'm looking at this, and honestly, this doesn't do a lot for me. Now, I'm sure you all know my buddy 19K Fox. He has some kind of partnership going on with MyArcade now where they're sending him products out to review. I think he took some time and went to see their booth at CES last year. Now, my only experience with the actual Joystick player so far has been his breakdown and play on the Pac-Man Joystick player that came out just last year. This is also like the Galaga weird flight stick game. I don't really super understand that, but based on Fox's appraisal of the product, it's not exactly the best product. They, of course, follow that up by doing something a little bit, if not a lot better, with the Outrun license, because as we can see here, instead of doing some kind of weird iteration of that, like one of these joystick players, they actually recreated what they did with the very impressive pole position. I think it's racing player, I think they call it. So it looks like we're getting a MyArcade racing player based on Outrun. Hopefully, unlike Revenge of Shinobi, it will be the arcade ROM, but this looks like it could be a very good product. But now we have our next tease in the Sega lineup, and of course, it's Sega's Blue Blur, their icon, their mascot that took over from Alex Kidd in the early 90s. Of course, we're talking about Sonic. Perfect time, too, as the Sonic 3 movie has just come out to rave reviews, mind you. So we're going to get our first look or tease from the upcoming Sonic joystick player as well, it looks like. So there you can get a look at the joystick. This is super colorful. Again, based on the console, there is no arcade to go off. It's got art from the levels in the game, and then you got your jump button here. There's a look at the joystick. We don't know if it has a unique top. It has that familiar top to all these micro driving and racing, all these MyArcades. I would give anything to take a couple minutes to just talk to them and get this redesign, because those wings are atrocious. Anyways, again, of note, the fact there is Sega branding on these products, even though we were told Sega wouldn't be willing to do that with third-party producers. MyArcade has cracked the code and has that license secured, and the branding is right on the product, so that is awesome. And then last but not least, we'll get our look at the front, and as you can clearly see, this is not arcade based. There's no coin in or credit here, it's just home and start, the buttons that are on the very front of the machine in order for you to play the games. Now, I'd like to tell you more about it, but that's it. That's all they've given us so far. So you're going to have to check out coverage of the CES booth, of the MyArcade CES booth during the event for more information on this arcade. But if you ever wanted to play Sonic in a joystick arcade, it looks like you're going to have your chance with this joystick player. Now, you guys know every Friday before Super Game Room Dudes, the godfather of retro gaming, self-titled, mind you, Glenn Planamento GRS goes live with his show Kicking It Old School, one of my personal favorites to watch every Friday before Super Game Room Dudes. I advise you to check it out as well. This week, Glenn was showcasing some new pictures of the upcoming GRS Build-a-cade FU, and it looks like we're getting pretty close to having maybe a finalized prototype version, and Glenn is teasing some kind of CES announcement he's doing himself, probably around how the Kickstarter or funding is going to work for the GRS Build-a-cade. But the biggest news of all is the fact that Glenn now has an actual prototype in his hands for testing, and of course, he sent out some images to me. We showed these a little bit earlier, I think, on one of P-Dub's live streams, but I wanted to share them with you again, including new pictures, and give kind of my thoughts on the machine. So there you can see it with its Donkey Kong Nintendo mod front on it, and this machine looks huge. This looks very impressive so far. Moving on to the next picture, there's a side view with the Nintendo piece on, and I mean, for me, this is the biggest draw. I mean, being able to buy something that has all the guts, everything already set up, I just have to buy this extension and then put the artwork on, and I've got my very own Donkey Kong full-size cab is something that's very, very exciting to me. So there's a look at the front of the machine with the Donkey Kong mod on, and of course this thing is massive. It looks beautiful. I think people are going to be very impressed with it. There's some looks with the Donkey Kong mod off of what the marquee is going to look like now. There's been some updates on that, which we'll cover in a minute, but there's also a look at the machine with like none of the finishings on it, just kind of the base of the machine. And then I want to go back because you can see this giant circle that's cut out here and this piece of wood underneath. That's for this really interesting gimmick Glenn is doing where the screen is going to be changeable. I don't know exactly how it works, but I think that if you're playing a horizontal game, the 19-inch screen that's included will be in the horizontal position. Then if you play a vertical game, it'll actually automatically rotate into the vertical position, and you can play the game that way. So a very interesting mechanic. There are some drawbacks, of course, with that. So then moving on, here's another side image of the Build-a-cade FU, and then we've got the bar top version here being worked on. This is very, very cool looking. Of course, you can take a look here at the actual ridges in the wood and the size and quality of the wood, and it's going to have real T-molding, which is very exciting. If it's a full-size arcade, you need real T-molding. I would argue even the smaller ones do. There's a look at it that's on the side. These are all the pictures Glenn shared with me, as well as some new 3D renders of what the machine will look like. So this is the finished product you can see with Glenn's Ultimate Control Panel in there. Now, I've never been the biggest fan of Glenn's Ultimate Control Panel on the iArcade. I thought it was a little squished, a little busy. There's a lot more room here. Like, I mean, for comfort's sake, look how far from the edge that joystick is. That is what we've been missing from most of these home arcade products, is that really big control panel and comfort. So good job, Glenn, on doing that. Of course, there's your push pull buttonhole spinners up here. I wish they were put somewhere else. It's so tough though to find room, because if you put the spinners down here, it might get in the way from your hands on the joystick. So it's kind of a tough situation. But the cool thing about this is just like the actual GRS Build-a-cade, there are going to be multiple control panels. So if you don't want this, very busy looking control panel that's a good multi-cade control panel, say for example, you want to play a twin stick, you want to play a single game like Donkey Kong, as most people are probably planning on switching this cab to, there are going to be different control panels that will suit what you need. So now I want to share a couple more updates from the GRS Facebook page. This is coming from anonymous member who's definitely not Glenn Baisley. It's 100% Glenn Baisley, showing the actual Build-a-cade prototype unit here with the Nintendo piece in, showing what that will look like before the arc goes on. And then here with the standard Build-a-cade FU full-size unit. So cool pictures, but he does leave a very interesting piece of information. I overheard they will be adjusting the base height to be taller and marquee area thinner to raise up the field of view, which is an actual very interesting point, one I made about the original GRS Build-a-cade. Now, honestly, with this overhanging marquee, I think it was more of an issue with the Build-a-cade, especially where the screen was 16:9. Some of the screen area was taken up from the field of view. You almost had to get under the actual marquee to see it at times. But with there, you can take a look at it. I mean, if you're looking down at it from a desk, that's your field of view. You realize how much you're missing out on there. But with the bigger arcade, I wouldn't imagine it would be as much of a problem. But still, I'm glad they're addressing it right away instead of it's something that we have to deal with after the fact. Then, of course, probably the most exciting picture of all for most of us is the GRS Build-a-cade FU actually up and operational. Glenn shared this picture, I think it was yesterday. It says yesterday, yeah. It's alive. It's alive. Now, this picture has kind of created a weird dynamic from the community. I mean, everybody knew about the rotating screen, but not everybody knew how it was going to be done. Of course, I posted my typical response. You guys all know I wanted a 26-inch screen in this. There's so much bezel there. Like, to me, this would have been amazing with a 26-inch screen. But the decision was made, of course, because of size limitations and cost limitations, to go with a 19-inch screen. Now, me personally, I still think this is really going to be cool, and especially when you're doing that Nintendo mod to play Donkey Kong, if you want to turn this into a Nintendo cabinet, the Nintendo cabinets only use 19-inch screens anyways. It's perfect for that. But I have heard other people say some of the feedback that they really don't like the actual wheel piece in there and find it to be a little off-putting. They don't like it. I know my buddy Charlie Chuck was very open in saying the comment, like, that would turn this from a buy to a possible not buy. I think this is a very early prototype. One of the things that will really improve this, because the circle, of course, is very essential for the rotating screen, but it can be a bit of an eyesore, is trying to match up the wood from that circle area with the wood outside on the bezel, and coming up with some kind of bezel for it as well will absolutely help. But, that seems to be the point of contention for a lot of people now with the rotating screen. Not everybody's a big fan of the circle that's there. Me personally, I don't know. I don't think it's that big a deal. Of course, you can also buy this cabinet and then eventually mod it, which is probably what I'll do if I get a second one. And I'm just going to say the hell with the automatic rotating piece. I don't even care about that for the Multicade thing. Sure, it's a cool gimmick, but what I would rather do is kind of like the Taito eGrit Mini, where you have like a full screen that you can pull out and then pop back in. That's more along the lines of what I would like to see with a bigger screen for this, but at the same time, you got to give him credit for his innovation with coming up with this circular design and the fact that the screen will automatically rotate. So guys, that's my news update for today. I think this actually might be my first video of January. Some pretty exciting stuff to share. Of course, Dungeons and Dragons is absolutely beautiful from Stern Pinball. You're probably questioning whether or not I'm going to buy it. Well, I can easily tell you, with the Canadian dollar being at the value it's at, it would cost me like $16,000 to get a Pro, I think it is. Or maybe that's the premium at $94.99. So I think this is one, unfortunately, I'm going to have to miss out on, but I'm very excited to finally play it when I travel, probably this upcoming September. I can't wait to check it out, and maybe if I eventually buy a second pinball machine, a second new pinball machine from Stern, this is one I definitely have my eye on. I'm leaning heavily right now on 3 for my second machine: Elvira House of Horrors if it's still available, Stranger Things Premium if it's still available, or Jaws Premium, with Jaws, believe it or not, kind of leading the pack. But this is the first one in a long while where I look at that playfield and what they've done with the Dragon, and I'm like, yeah, this could be very special. So very excited for that. Of course, the MyArcade announcements, it's kind of a hit or miss, because some stuff they do, like the pole position and what it looks like with the outrun, that is really badass, and I'm rooting for them. And then other stuff they do, like these console-based handhelds, I'm not saying they're bad, but they're definitely not for me. So I'm excited to see what they show off at CES. It's been fun seeing these teases every day. I'll give them credit. They are putting out exciting news, getting great licenses, and trying. And, I'm kind of coming around on MyArcade. Am I going to be a huge fan? Definitely not. I don't think their product is for me, but I can certainly see the value in it now. And then last but not least, Glenn, of course, what he's doing with his Multicade. It is the coolest concept I think I've ever seen from like a full-size Multicade for this space. If he can deliver this for well under $1,000, get some really good shipping, this is going to be a very special product. I love the flexibility with a rotating screen, with interchangeable control panels. This could be a regular Multicade, this could be a twin stick Multicade, this could be a driving Multicade, this could be a flight stick Multicade. Lots of options, giant machine with really high quality. I do hear the feedback from other people on the wheel in the center. That's not something that everybody likes right now. I think with the demo image, that's the wood that came over from the factory over in China, and then something Glenn mocked up for the screen. I don't necessarily think that's what the final product is going to look like, and I don't think the circle will be that aggressive. So I asked people to take a step back on that. The circle will not be as ugly as you think it is right now. I'm excited to see this thing actually up and operational. I do think there still is ability to, switch in a larger screen, but not for Glenn. I think Glenn's going to get it out the door. I think that's going to be on us, and that's okay too. I just wish there was some option that I could click, was like, Glenn, I don't want to pay for your rotating screen. I'm going to mod this anyways, and leave that part out, but these are going to be prefab, I know. Anyways, guys, let me know in the comments down below, what do you think of all the news? What do you think of the latest pictures from Glenn and the Multicade FU, Build-a-cade FU? This thing's going to be pretty cool, right? Can't wait to see all the final details on this and when we can get it in our homes. MyArcade's cool. Let me know what you think of them. Is it something that's starting to excite you the same way it's building a little bit more excitement and trust in me? And then last but not least, my God, Dungeons & Dragons is absolutely gorgeous. Unlike me, hopefully you live in an area where you can just go play this when it gets on location. I know most of them will be Pro, because Pro are easier to maintain, so that's what these arcades get. But I can't wait to hear your guys' feedback when you get to play it. And much like all these new pinball releases, I'll give you my feedback probably in a year when I get a chance to play it. Anyways, guys, thank you so very much for watching. This is Michael B. the Game Genie. I'll talk to you next time.